What's up, everybody, and welcome to another edition of High Mythology, the show where we get higher than a crow's revenge, high enough to laugh with fish. Take your pick. We tell you guys silly stories from mythology and folklore. Hi. Yeah, sitting here with Kimbo, just sitting here.
Getting ready for some stories.
Tonight we're going to be doing some Indian folktales. Folktales from India.
Indeed.
They're
oral.
Just the word oral brings out the teenager in me. Yeah. So without further ado, Kimbo, why don't you go ahead and get us started there?
Thank you. We'll start with story one.
One
man's virtue. Only Brahmins lived in a certain village, and they were all very pious. They lived very simple lives and offered their morning and evening prayers regularly, performed every ritual prescribed for them, knew the Vedas by heart, and lived accordingly. Like the Vedic Brahmins, they tended a holy fire in the middle of their huts and never allowed it to go out. In one such family...
I'm so pious.
In one such family, one night, the youngest daughter-in-law...
God damn you. I thought this was from India, not Russia.
They're close. Same continent. The daughter-in-law felt the need to go out and pee. It was very dark, and she was afraid of going out into the dark, so she made water over the embers of the holy fire in the middle of the hut.
I mean, we've all been there, but you don't piss on the fire.
In the morning, when the family woke up, they found an ingot of pure gold in the embers. Everyone was astonished.
She needs to drink a lot more water.
The head of the family, an old and wise Brahmin, once said...
Someone has done something wrong. How else would there be a bar of gold in a Brahmin fireplace? So pious.
He lined up the whole family and questioned them all until the youngest daughter-in-law confessed to what she had done the previous night. He warned her not to do it again and told everyone not to follow her example. He arranged for someone to escort her at night if she needed to go. The news of this miracle traveled through the village, and slowly at first, and then more and more often, bars of gold began to appear in the ritual fires of various Brahmin families.
It's just such an awkward conversation to have. Okay, I don't want to come out and say it, but someone has been pissing in the sacred fire, honey. Yeah.
It's just true. Many of them became rich and began to build big houses for themselves, to wear silk and muslin, and to give big dowries with their daughters. The village was no longer the same. But one family continued to be poor. They lived in a hut, almost the only hut left in town, and at the edge of the village. The wife quarreled with her husband every day. She pleaded,
"Why don't you let me go at least once in the ritual fireplace? Everybody's doing it. I mean, pissing in a fireplace is definitely on my bucket list." Yeah, and then we won't be poor anymore. We can have all the cigarettes we want. We can day drink and watch the Maury Povich show on television. We'll have a morsel to eat and a piece of cloth for each of us. We could both wear clothes now, not just one of us.
Rigs.
Yeah, they're so poor, only one of them can wear clothes per day. Okay, you take the clothes today. I'll just stay in naked. Please, let me just once poop in the fireplace. This one bar of gold will last us a long time, I promise.
She nagged and she wheeled and she used all of her wiles. She was desperate. It would be so easy, but her rigid husband wouldn't let her do it. When she nagged him one day more than he could bear. When she nagged him one more day than he could bear, he burst out saying,
"Do you know why the whole Brahmin village is still held together?"
The exasperated wife mocked back, saying,
"Oh, why? Why is it held together? How? What? Is it glue, duct tape? Because you won't let me pee in the goddamn fire? Like everyone else is pissing in the fire. Why can't I piss in the fire too?
The Brahmin says.
Precisely. We were holding the whole community together by what we are. If we also do what all of them do, or even if we leave this place, it'll fall to pieces.
The wife thought this was sheer conceit, she said.
Oh, so us, by being poor, are keeping all of the rich neighbors alive? What notions you have of yourself. That's just stupid.
The Brahmin said.
Well, I'll show you the truth of what I say. Pack up everything. Let's move to the next village and you'll see what happens.
I like how you went from like a country to Irish.
Irish country.
And they packed everything and moved to the next village. Within a week, quarrels arose amongst the Brahmins. Each accused the other of wanting to buy up his place and his land. The greedier ones ordered their wives and daughter-in-laws to make more and more water in the ritual fireplaces until the fires almost went out.
Okay, try pooping in it.
One day, in greed and anger, one family set fire to another. The hurt family retaliated with more fire, and the fire spread, and the houses after houses were burnt down till there was nothing left of the village. Yeah. When the news reached him, the Brahmin...
No one had any pee left in them to put out the fire. If only we weren't hadn't all just peed also.
When word reached news to the Brahmin who had moved away, said to his wife,
"You didn't fucking believe me. One virtue's guards not only oneself, but everyone around."
Bitch. All right, we're just going to keep moving on. Moving on. Number 2
we
story.
The pissing in the fire story.
Story number 2. I'm...
This guy's pooping in the refrigerator. Whoa. We just had a minor cat orchestrated earthquake.
Bitch.
I'd put it at least a 3.9 on the kitty cat scale.
A crow's revenge.
A crow's revenge. People seemed excited.
Ooh. In the branches of the big banyan tree, a crow family built a nest and lived in it. A black snake would crawl through the whole trunk and eat the crow's chicks as soon as they were hatched. After this happened many times, the crow's wife could not take it any longer. She said to her husband,
"We've lost all our chicks to this awful snake, who just waits for me to hatch them and gobbles them all up. We are utterly helpless. Let's move to a different tree."
But the crow liked the tree and had grown used to it, and he said,
"We must find a way to kill this enemy of ours."
She asked.
"You just took that to a whole nother level." "How can we? We're mere crows, and he's such a big snake,"
he says.
"There must be a way. I may be small and weak, but I have cunning friends. This time, I'll not let this pass."
So he went to his friend the jackal, who heard his case and advised him, "We will take care of this villain. Go to that lake where the king and his queen bathe naked and swim.
It's called the Banging Falls.
Pick up the necklace or a jewel and fly away with it. Boom. And put it in the snake's hole."
Right in his pooper.
The crow at once flew off to the lake and waited for the king's party to arrive, undress, take off their gold chains and pearl necklaces, and get into the water. Then, when they were busy enjoying themselves, he picked up a necklace and flew away. The king's servants saw this and quickly picked up their spears and sticks to pursue the crow. The crow went straight to the snake's hole and under the tree and dropped the necklace in it. The king's servant dug it up and found the black snake and beat it to death, picked up the queen's necklace and went their way. The crow and his family were left in peace. The end.
That's fucked up. That's kind of a fucked. I mean, given it was eating their babies, so I understand.
Yeah.
But yeah, he really went full Punisher. I will have the king's men beat you to death. jeez.
I didn't realize she caused a tidal wave.
She got tidal waves over here. It was like a T-Rex stomping up to us in a Jurassic Park movie.
All right, story number 3. A story in search of an audience.
Hey, that's you.
Hey.
Hey.
Okay, forgive me. I'm not going to be able to pronounce this right. Once on the day of Raspantami, the 7th day of the month of Magha, when they took the temple chariot in processions through the streets, an old lady took to the ritual bath from head to toe and performed a puja.
Puja.
She had to tell someone the story of the sun god on that Sunday in the month of Magna. That was part of her observance of the day's ritual. So she took a handful of rice colored yellow with turmeric and set out to find someone whom she could give this sanctified rice and tell the story. But everyone she met was in too much of a hurry. Her sons were hurrying to the court of the local king, and it was already getting late, and they didn't want the king to scold them. They're bad boys.
The bad boys.
When her sons refused to listen to her story, she went to her search of her grandsons. It was time for them to go to school, and they didn't want to listen to the old woman's story.
Not now, old lady.
When she went to her daughter-in-law, she said she was too busy because she had to attend to her baby. And the old woman then went out of the house to the women who were washing their clothes on the riverbanks and asked them to lend their ears for her story for the Sunday's month of Magna. As they were just finishing their morning's work, they were in a hurry to get home, and they refused. Wherever she went, whomever she approached, she could not find a single listener.
It's just so fucked up. Why would no one listen to her story?
Right?
You want to hear a story? No, go away. I'm busy.
The Brahmins, the woodcutters, the basket weavers, the washermen, the potters, not one of them was willing to set a few minutes aside to listen to her story.
Having an old lady tell you random stories while you work is the ancient world equivalent of listening to podcasts.
Yeah, dude. It's fucking dope.
Today I'll be listening to all the crazy shit that happened to this old lady.
Yeah, that's most of my clientele too for me. I have a lot of older clients that tell me their life story. I'm like, wow, you had a fucked life.
Yeah, what a crazy
Where
life.
did you come from?
Who are you?
I'm like, you have an amazing life. This is fucking hilarious. As a consequence, all these people who refused to listen to her story for the Sunday of Magna suffered. Her sons were punished at court. Her daughter-in-law soon found that her baby was deathly ill. That's fucking horrible. Her grandsons were beaten by their teacher at school. The women in the river were roundly abused by their mother-in-laws. The Brahmins could find no one to feed him that day. And for some inexplicable reason, splinters went into the basket maker's fingers, and try as they would, not a pot would come out right on the potter's wheels that day. The old woman did not know any of this, and she was sad that she could not find anyone to listen to her story. But she was patient, and she finally went to the back streets and found a pregnant woman of the salt cellar caste who said that she would listen to the woman's story, but that she was terribly hungry. The poor woman said that she would have some pasayam first. Payasam first. She wanted it made with milk and sugar and a full measure of rice because she was very, very hungry.
Got a baby in there.
The old woman went home, made a full measure of the sweet pudding, and brought it to the pregnant woman. The woman was very happy and ate it all. But before the old woman began her story, she was fast asleep. While she slept like this, without a thought in the world, the old woman just waited, the ritual rice in her hand. Suddenly, she heard the child in the womb of the pregnant woman say to her, "Why don't you tell me the story? I will listen to it. Put the grains of rice in my mother's navel and tell me the story." The old woman was delighted. She carefully filled the sleeping woman's navel with ritual rice, and then she told the round belly in front of her and the baby within her story for the Sundays of the month of Magna. After she finished her story, she sang a lullaby that said,
Wherever you go, deserted villages will become prosperous towns. Cotton seeds will become pearls. Dry old cows will give milk. Barren women will have children. Lost jewels will be found. And dead men will come back to life. Oh, baby. You have such powers to make a king's heart glad.
You forgot to mention dry trees will be covered with fruit.
Fruit them trees.
Okay. By the time she finished her story and her song, the salt cellar woman woke up from her sleep, and now she was willing to hear the story. But the old woman said,
The baby in your womb, listen to my story. It'll have a good life. Send me word when your child is born and let me know whether it's a boy or a girl.
and then she went home. A few weeks later, the old woman got news that the poor salt cellar woman was delivered of a girl. The old woman hastened to the salt cellar street with a sari and a small beaked cup with castor oil and medicines, all things that one gives to a newborn baby. With the sari, she made a hammock for the baby, tied the hammock to the branch of the tree by a nearby forest, and put the baby in it, and asked the trees to rock it like a cradle, and begged the birds to sing the lullaby. Now the child's mother was free to go about her business during the day and earn her living while the trees and the birds looked after her baby. The old woman then went home.
Who's watching your kid? The birds.
Birds in the tree.
The tree and the birds. Did you really just hang your baby from a tree and expect it to be okay while you work? It's a short day. It's half day.
Around that time, the king of the country happened to pass through the forest. He heard the songs of the birds and the wailings of a small child. She was wailing, guys. He was curious and looked around until he found the hammock tied to the branch and the birds singing a lullaby around it. The bird said to the king,
Rock this little girl, your wife. Oh, yuck. And our mother. Weird. Take her home with you and marry her when she grows up. Squawk.
So he put the child in a palanquin and took her along with him. Yay. When they passed through the deserted village, it became a beautiful, bustling town. And on their way, they rested in a cotton field, and all the cotton seeds became pearls. And in the poor village they passed, old cows began to give milk, and dry trees sprouted green leaves and were soon covered with fruit. And in his palace, the king's first wife, who had been barren all this while, was blessed with a child that year. The salt cellar's baby grew into a little girl and soon into a young woman, bringing year after year new riches to the kingdom. At an appropriate time, the king married her. I find this odd that some bitch came down, stole my kid, tied her to a fucking tree.
What is an appropriate time for that? At an appropriate time, he married his surrogate daughter.
14.
Well, yeah.
That's an appropriate time back then.
I don't think that's an appropriate time. I don't think there is an appropriate time for that weird of a situation.
Yeah, no, that your wife raised her like a dick. That's some fucking Woody Allen shit.
That's what I mean. It's like it's his fucking daughter,
God.
stepdaughter, basically.
Fuck. That is some weird shit. See, Woody, you're fucking gross. Anyway.
Where's our whomper? Let's just whomp for that whole situation.
As you can imagine, the older wife was not at all pleased and was mad with jealousy at the attention given to the beautiful young queen.
She had to raise her replacement. That's another level of fucked up, too.
Who had come from nowhere into the palace.
Here, raise this kid. What do we need a kid for? Is it like gonna be our child? No, basically, I'm gonna leave you for that kid in probably 15 years because I'm a weirdo.
Yeah. Yep, that sounds right. One day, in a fit of jealousy, she gathered all the precious jewels in the palace and put them in a box and had it thrown into the sea. Some time later, the fisherman caught an enormous fish and brought it to the palace and presented it to the older queen. She turned up her nose at it and complained of its stench, and sent it scornfully to the younger queen, who was so delighted with it that she personally supervised its cooking. When the cooks cut it open, they found a box of jewels that the older queen had cast into the sea. The king came to hear of it, and at once he remembered the lullaby that the birds had sung and listened to all the wonderful things this young woman would bring about him. He had seen with his own eyes most of the things that had come to pass. The deserted village had turned into a beautiful town, cotton seeds that had turned into pearls, old cows that had flowed with milk, and dry trees had borne fruit. And now a lost chest of jewels had been miraculously recovered. Only one thing was left. He was meant to test the last of his young queen's power, the power to give life to the dead. So he dined in his young queen's quarters, and then he moved to his older wife's bedchamber, where he secretly took poison and fell dead. Wow. The elder wife was distraught and sent for the younger one to come and join her in committing sati on the husband's pyre. While the body was being made ready for this cremation, the young woman prepared herself to join the husband in death. When she was doing so, the Brahmin came to her and asked for water to wash his feet. He also asked the young queen to wash her own feet. And then he asked for a drink of water, and then asked her to have some fucking water.
Please tell me you didn't drink the foot water.
I hope it's not the same.
I hope it's not the foot water.
He asked for some saddlewood paste for his body and asked her to smear turmeric on hers. After that, he took some some vermilion, and made a cast mark on his forehead and asked her to wear a dot of the cum on hers. Then he asked to be fed a meal and asked her to eat too. And after that, he asked for a betel nut and a betel leaf to mark the end of the meal and the ritual, and asked her to take the betel nuts and the betel leaf for herself. Thus, finally, getting to conclusions, he had made her do everything he himself as a Brahmin would do. All the while, the young queen was grieving in a hurry to go to the cremation ground where her husband's body was waiting to be cremated. But the Brahmin did not let her leave until she had done all that he had said that she needed to do. Wow. At the end of it all, she asked him who he was. He said he was Adinarayana. Sorry. The sun god. I'm sorry if I looked at that.
That makes sense. No wonder he's fucking with her so much. Now stand on one leg. No, other leg. No, other leg.
Now hop. Rub your belly at the same time.
Now hop backwards.
Touch your nose.
Touch your nose.
The sun god about whom, wow.
Womb? About womb.
The old woman had told her story when she was still in the womb. Even before she was born, he gave her some rice colored with turmeric and told her to sprinkle it on her husband's body, and then he vanished. The young queen rushed to the cremation ground with the rice in her hand. Everyone was waiting for her, and she walked up quickly to the king's body and threw the rice on it. He woke up at once on his bed of firewood, as if on a bed where he had fallen asleep. When he and everyone else asked how these magical powers, asked how he had been revived so miraculously, she told them all about that she had received these magical powers only by virtue of hearing the story for the Sundays of Magma Masa, even before she was born. The king was astonished, and he said,
If merely listening to the story can do that, how much more effective would it be if people actually perform the ritual and celebrate, huh?
Then he ordered the arrangements to be made for his wives to perform the ritual of Varada. The same ritual that the queens perform that Sunday is followed to this day by the upper castes in the wicked age of Kali.
Interesting.
Hi.
Hi. Hello. How's it going?
Woo!
Yeah.
Not too bad. We got next the clay mother. This one's pretty fucking clay mother-in-law. Sorry.
Clay mother?
It's pretty entertaining.
It's pretty interesting here.
Once upon a time, there was a very docile daughter-in-law. She was obedient to her husband and her husband's mother, and waited upon her slightest wish. The old woman kept up her dignity as the mother-in-law, saying very little and often merely nodding her commands. Every morning, the daughter-in-law would come to the old woman and ask her how many measures of rice she should cook for that day. The old woman pondered the problem seriously and then she held up her hand. On some days, the hand would show 2 outstretched fingers, and on other days it would show 3, according to her fancy. The daughter-in-law would take this order silently and go to the kitchen and cook 2 measures of rice, or 3, as the wrinkled hand commanded. One day the old woman fell ill and passed away. The young daughter-in-law wept her eyes out, and she could not see her way about the little house, and she missed her mother-in-law's daily instructions. Who was there now to tell her how much rice she should cook that day? Who?
How will I know how much rice to cook? Oh, no.
She was in a perpetual flunk.
I'm in a
Unable.
flunk.
Unable to make any decisions. Her husband was at first pleased with his wife's devotion to his mother, but he soon tired of answering her eternal questions about the measures of fucking rice. Bitch, 2. There's only 2 of us. He thought of a way out of all of this bother. So he went to the nearest potter and ordered a clay image of his mother as large as life. He gave special instructions to the potter to make one hand show 2 fingers and the other 3. In a few days, the clay mother-in-law was painted, dressed, and ready for use. The husband brought it home and painted it in a prominent place, or planted it in the prominent place near the kitchen. The young wife was delighted at the return of her lost mother-in-law. It seemed to be the end of her troubles, and then she could begin the day properly now. Whenever she was in doubt of the measurements of the rice, she would look throughout the kitchen and take orders. If she happened to see the 2 fingers hand first, she would cook 2 measures for the day. If she caught a glimpse of the 3-fingered hand of that day, the rice pot would overflow with boiled rice. She was happy with the clay mother-in-law, and her husband was happy with the happiness of his wife. Things went on smoothly for a while, till one day the husband became aware that his rice bags were being emptied every few weeks, though there were only 2 people in the house. He asked his wife, and she told him her daily procedure. And she asked her mother-in-law every morning and followed her instructions. Her husband was furious and said,
2 or 3 measures of rice every goddamn day for just the 2 of us? Ridiculous. We ain't eating all of it, are we? When my mom was alive, we used to cook the same 2 measures and all 3 of us would have full bellies.
She replied in a low voice.
Oh, it's a very low voice. Hello. Well, you're not 2, but 3. You've forgotten about your mother, asshole, as usual. I give a dinner before I eat on my days, many days. I have very little left for myself, so mainly we sit around and watch TV sometimes. It's very nice. If you don't mind my saying so, Mother eats more now than she used to. She's getting a little chalky over there.
The husband couldn't believe his ears. What was this wild tale of a mud mother-in-law eating up a whole bag of rice? He flew into a rage and beat up his wife. And then he threw her out and the clay mother-in-law with her.
I'm not doing this because of the rice. I'm doing it because I feel inadequate as a man.
But the truth was this. Twice every day, the young wife, according to the customs, would spread a leaf before her mother-in-law and serve all the dishes one by one. But as soon as she went into the kitchen, the neighbor's wife would come in quietly through a cunningly made hole in the wall, steal all the food, and vanish the way she came. That's a pretty good one.
Just imagining trying to figure it out the whole time. What's happening? And the lady just pops out of the wall and just munches all the food. Crawls back through the hole.
This way, she didn't have to cook at all. The poor fool of a daughter-in-law believed all along that her mother-in-law had dined off her leaf as usual. Her innocence had now landed her in the streets. For this she was miserable. She took to the effigy of her beloved mother-in-law in her arms and walked into the night, afraid of the dark.
Just her, the
Crying.
mother-in-law's touch. The husband's at it that much. He's like, you and my mom both need to leave.
Crying, praying, and cursing her fate. She walked and soon came to the woods outside of town. She clutched her mother-in-law closer to her bosom and shivered in the terrifying dark. Every little sound scared the poor young woman, who had rarely stepped out of her house before.
That's what it sounds like. He's kept her locked in the house forever. She doesn't know what anything is.
She somehow climbed a tree and tied herself to a branch with her sari, clinging all the while to her mother-in-law. As she sat there trembling, she heard loud footfalls. Burly mustached men with burning torches in their hands. They were parting the bushes and coming towards her tree. From their dress and their murderous looks, she guessed that they were thieves. They came right under the tree where she was hiding, tired after a busy day, and they lowered their burdens from their backs and sat down to share the loot.
It's been a busy day thieving, hasn't it? Yes, champ, it has.
In the light of the torches, they seemed like devils to her. The poor woman began to shake in fear and lost grip of the clay mother-in-law. And down it fell with a great big crash right into a gang of thieves under the tree. The thieves panicked and took to their heels and fled in all directions, and before they'd know it, had hit him. Meanwhile, the young wife had fainted from sheer terror, and she laid unconscious amongst the branches until dawn. When day dawned and she woke up from the nightmare, the first thing she saw on the forest floor was her clay mother-in-law, broken into 3 pieces, surrounded by countless treasures and a few burnt-out torches. After making sure there was no one around, she climbed down from her perch and gathered up all the pieces of her clay mother. She thanked her for saving her life and bringing her an undreamed of treasure. A few hours later, when she made her way back, the furious husband saw his wife at his door with a broken clay in one arm and a heavy bundle in the other. He scolded her first for coming back, but soon learned of the precious bundle that she had brought. He dragged her inside the house and heard her story in all its detail. His eyes popped out as she saw the rubies and the gold in the bundles, and then he put them aside safely, and with her help...
His eyes?
Yeah. And with her help, he went back to the tree in the forest, bundled up the remaining loot, and brought home secretly a treasure worth of a kingdom. As he spread the treasures on the floor and sorted them out, he wanted to know how much it all amounted to. He sent his wife to the neighbor's house to borrow a big measuring vessel, warning her not to breathe a word about what they were going to measure. The neighbor woman was curious to know what these poor people had that day to measure such a big vessel. What? The neighbor woman was curious to know what these poor people had that day to measure in such a big vessel. Wow.
That's when you know you're poor, when you're like, can I get a 1 gallon measuring cup? Can I borrow that from you? And they look at you and they're like, you can't afford to eat a gallon. Use a gallon of anything in one recipe. You're that poor. I've got a cup.
That's funny. I train in liters only.
Yeah. This is all you need to make your hamburger helper. Go home, poor person.
Right. But the young wife, But the young wife would not tell her anything. So the neighbor stuck a piece of tamarind at the bottom of the measuring vessel before she lent it to the young woman. When the measuring vessel was returned, the neighbor woman and her husband were astonished to see a brilliant gem stuck to the tamarind at the bottom. They wondered, speculated, and thought of all the possible ways in which their neighbors, penniless until yesterday, could have amassed such a wealth. Enough to be measured in a measuring vessel. It was a mystery, and this woman grilled the young wife with questions at the very next opportunity. The innocents told her in whispers. She said,
"Don't tell anyone."
Shh. Pouring out her breathless tales of her adventures in the night, and how she had been driven out, how frightened she was, how she stayed in a tree with her mother-in-law, and all the rest of it. She ended up saying it was all her mother-in-law's doing, and they now had all this wealth. The clever neighbor knew better than to believe this nonsense about the dead mother-in-law, but her husband thought here was a shortcut to fortune. He too had a big clay doll made, put it in his wife's arms, took her into the jungle, and left her there.
I see from your story what I've learned is you can drop your wife off in the woods and either she won't come back or maybe you'll be rich.
He told her that he would never take her back into the house unless she brought her husband as much wealth as the neighbor's stupid wife had brought hers. Now this woman was confident of her plans and had worked out her strategy carefully. As expected, the same thieves came there with torches in hand to share the day's loot. As soon as they untied their bundles, the woman in the tree threw down her doll on them. There was a big crash, and at once the thieves took to their heels. But they didn't go far this time. They didn't go far. They were suspicious. They had been taken unawares the first time, but now they wanted to see what this crash was all about. They hid behind some trees and watched, and they saw a woman get down from the tree and began robbing them of their ill-won riches. With shouts of anger, they closed in on her and scolded her for scaring them out of their treasure the other night.
You shouldn't scare folk like that.
And before she could say anything, they beat her until she was blue and faint and left her tied up to the tree. Her husband...
she was going to get off with a light scolding the way they made that. He scolded her. He told her, you shouldn't have done that.
Lucky they didn't cut off her hand. I'm just saying. Her husband found her the next day, nearly gone mad with fear, and very much worse for the night treasures hunt, but not a penny richer. How's the end?
That's the end. Oh, God. That's just the husband, too. Like the thought, so I can drop my wife off in the woods is what you're telling me.
And I'll be rich or ready to be married again.
Yeah.
Cool.
Cool. Good to know.
Number 5.
Story number 5.
The clever daughter-in-law.
Ooh.
There was a mother-in-law who was a terrible tyrant, and she gave her daughter-in-law no freedom. She saw to it that the young woman did all the housework, cleaned all the cowsheds, and carried water from the well. And by this time it would already be evening. Mother and son would then eat by themselves and give the daughter-in-law leftovers and stale rice. If the young woman was so much as breathed a complaint, the mother-in-law would pick up a broomstick and rain blows on her head. If she wept, the old woman would say,
Jesus Christ. You slut, you hussy. You want to wash away our house in your tears and bring bad luck. I don't feel comfortable saying this. Your daughter of a whore.
And so on. The son was meek and kept his mouth shut. In their backyard, a snake gourd plant grew and thrived. Long gourds swung from it, and everyone's mouth watered when they saw the gourds. In season, the mother-in-law would make a big potful of delicious snake gourd talata.
Everyone's mouth watered when they saw the gourds.
Thank you, Dustin. She and her son would eat most of it and give the daughter-in-law their leavings. Once, after several days of the semi-starvation, the young woman was seized with the craving to eat the full meal of the delicious snake gourd talata. And that day, the daughter-in-law came home in a hurry with her garbage basket and called out to her mother-in-law. The old woman shrieked.
Why are you howling like a vixen? What's the matter with you? It's the middle of the day.
She said, I ran into the big auntie, husband. And he says auntie is not doing well. No. And wants to see you, yes. She is seriously ill and is holding on to her life only to see you, yes. He said he wanted me to tell you that. The mother-in-law, beating her breast, cried,
Oh, my sister is dying. Oh, sister, what hath happened to you? Come in now. I'm sauteing the tolata. You take care of it. I'll go see my sister.
And she left the house. The daughter-in-law was quite excited, and she made some more tolata. She cooked all sorts of other dishes and served her husband a big meal. And then she poured all of the tolata into a big vessel and took it on her hip and went as if she were going to get some water for the house. She went straight for the temple of Kali, the black goddess, and entered it and closed the door behind her. There was no one there, not a soul. She sat there and ate the entire pot full of tolata. The goddess who was looking on was astonished at the speed of her eating and the quantity she consumed. In her amazement, she put her right hand on her mouth, and the daughter-in-law didn't notice any of this, but continued to eat to her heart's content. When she was done, she belched a big belch and uttered satisfaction. Picked up the empty vessel and went to the pond to wash it. When she came home with the pot of water, the main door of her house was closed. The mother-in-law had returned, and she tapped on the door, which was soon opened by her angry mother-in-law. Sparks were flying from her eyes, and she had a stick in her hand and rained blows on the young woman's back and waist until she fell to the ground, crying pitifully. She said,
You daughter of a whore, how long have you waited to cheat me like this? You've gobbled up a whole pot full of tolata like a buffalo. You dirty slut.
screamed the woman, and rained more blows.
Blows.
When the husband came home, he too joined in the punishment.
Why?
He got a full fucking belly. He don't know.
He doesn't even know what's going on. What? Okay, yeah, no. What are we beating her for?
Meanwhile, the whole town was buzzing with the news that the image of Kali in the temple had now had its hand on its mouth. People from other towns also came to see this miracle, and they had all had their own interpretation. Interpretation. Wow.
And penetration.
Sure. Everyone was scared that this was a bad sign, that something terrible was going to happen to the village, and they thought and they shuddered, saying, Someone has polluted the goddess. That's why she has her mouth shut with her hands. She's so angry. There won't be any more rain. No more rain. No more children will be born in this village anymore.
No.
They were terrorists.
Thank
you.
I'm the baddest motherfucker around.
Terror-stricken, worship and rituals were performed all over the village. They arranged festivals and sacrificed goats, but nothing seemed to please the goddess. So the village elders sent the town crier through the area to announce a big reward for anyone who could make the goddess remove her hand from her mouth. No one came forward. The daughter-in-law watched all of this, and then one day she came to her mother-in-law and said, Mother-in-law, tell the elders we go back to the goddess Kali to remove her hand from her mouth. I know how to do it. Yes. The mother-in-law was furious at first and said,
Look at this fool. She wants me to lose face in the village. She wants me to act big, as if she was a holy woman. What no one could do, she says she'll do. Fat chance loser.
She sneered, but the daughter-in-law persisted and finally convinced her that she knew something that no one else knew.
I sneer at you.
At the appointed day, the young woman took her tamarind broomstick and the garbage basket full of rubbish and went to the temple. She shut everyone out and closed the door behind her, and she put down the basket in front of the black goddess and brandished her broomstick, challenged Kali, saying, You stupid, jealous female, what is it with you that I ate my snort guard, Talala? Why do your eyes burn? If you only asked me, I'd have given you some, yes. May your face burn. May your cheeks swell and explode. May your eyes sink in and go blind. Will you take your hand off your mouth now, or shall I beat you with my broomstick now?
She's going hardcore. I will give you a pink eye.
That's fucking There was no answer. The daughter-in-law was furious, and she looked like Kali, the black goddess herself. She went up to the image and gave Kali's face several whacks of her broomstick. And Kali whimpered. Kali whimpered and cried, "Ayo!" and removed her hand from her mouth. The image now looked as if she had always looked. The daughter-in-law muttered, "That is better." And she picked up her basket and her broom and came home with the news that she had managed to get Kali to take her hand off her mouth. The whole village was agog with the news. They ran to the temples to see for themselves, and they couldn't believe their own eyes. They praised the daughter-in-law with the greatest of chaste wives, a Piverate, whose virtue had given her miraculous powers. They gave her a big reward and many gifts. And now the mother-in-law was terrified by this incident. She felt if her daughter-in-law had strange powers, she would take revenge against her for her terrible shit that she's done for all these years. The young woman knew some kind of magic, and who knew what she might do?
Who knew what she might do?
On the dark new moon day, at dead of night, mother and son whispered.
Okay.
Mother and son whispered to each other, and she said to him,
Son, this one frightened even Kali, the mother goddess, made her take her hand off of her mouth. And now she's holding her eye. I think it looks infected. She won't let us go unharmed. We've beaten her, starved her, given her every kind of trouble. I farted on her pillow pretty regularly. And I oftentimes would spit on her toothbrush too.
Just for fun.
Just for fun. She'll take revenge, I'm sure of it. She'll finish us off. What shall we do?
The cowardly son says.
Well, I can't think of anything. You tell me.
The mother says.
Okay, she's asleep now. We'll wrap her up in a mat, take her into the fields, burn her in a pit there, maybe beat her with a baseball bat, Joe Pesci style. Then I'll get you a beautiful new bride, and we'll both get ice cream on the way home.
He said.
Did you say ice cream? All right, let's do it right now.
And they both gagged the young wife and quickly rolled her in her bedcloth and mat. She knew they were going to do something awful to her, but she mustered her courage and laid still. They carried her to the pit in the field outside the village and hid her behind a bush while they went looking for twigs and firewood. And as soon as they left, she rolled out and loosened the mat, slid out of it, pulled off the string around her hands, and took the gag out of her mouth. She found a log nearby, which she had wrapped in her bedclothes and mat, and then she walked a short distance away, climbed a banyan tree, and hid herself in its branches. Mother and son came hurrying back, and they spread the twigs and the branches all around the bundle in the mat, and put more firewood around it, and covered it with dry straw and lighted it. The fire burned with leaping flames, and as they watched it, when the knots in the branches crackled and burst, they said,
It sounds like a fucking Scorsese movie. Is this a sequel to Goodfellas? The bones are splitting.
And when the log inside caught fire, a large knot cracked into the flames and went off like a gunshot. They were satisfied that the skull had now exploded as it does in cremation. It was long past midnight, and they went home. The daughter-in-law crouched hidden in the branches, and the same night 4 robbers came there and sat under the tree and divided up their loot. They had just broken into a rich man's mansion and plundered jewels, gold, and cash.
Cash.
As they sat down, they saw a fire burning a distance away. So one of them climbed the tree to see if there was anyone near the fire. He came right up to the branch where the young woman was perched, and when he saw someone sitting there, he said softly,
"Who's there?"
And she boldly put out her hand and gently shut his mouth and whispered, "Shh, not so loud. I am a celestial. I am looking for a good and handsome man. Yes, I will marry you and make you rich beyond your wildest dreams. Just be quiet."
I like to imagine she put the finger up to his mouth. Shh.
Though you can show me all you want, our listeners cannot actually see it. Just say.
I forgot that the camera's not on.
The robber couldn't believe what was happening to him. He thought he had reached heaven and seen the great white elephant descend from the sky. He took her hand and said,
Yep, are you for real?
She said, "Mm-hmm." And then she slowly pulled out her little bag of betel leaf and a betel nut and gave him some, and put some into her own mouth. He came closer to kiss her, and she turned away, saying, "Look, we are not married yet, but you can put your betel leaf into my mouth with your tongue, and then once I've eaten it from your mouth, I will be as good as your wife. Yes? All right?" Beside himself with joy, he put out his tongue with the chewed betel leaf on it and brought it close to her mouth. She at once closed her teeth powerfully on his tongue and bit it off. Screaming with unbearable pain, he lost his grip and fell down. The robber below ran helter-skelter in panic.
Protect
And
your
the man,
mustache!
who had lost his tongue, could only babble and blabber,
Jesus, she got hardcore.
and spit blood, making noises like blah, 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 blah. But as he too ran after his companions, his noises scared them even more, and they fled faster, with him squealing behind. When it was light, the daughter-in-law curiously climbed down the tree and saw to her amazement the gold jewels and the money under the tree. She quickly bundled it all up and went straight home. When she tapped on the door, calling out, Mother-in-law, please open the door." The old woman opened the door hesitantly, and her face bleached with fear. There in front of her was her smiling daughter-in-law. The mother-in-law fainted at the sight, and the young woman carried her into the hall, sprinkled cooled water on her face, and revived her. The husband just stood there, not knowing what to think. When she had came to and opened her eyes, the mother-in-law asked,
How How did you, who are you, how was it you, what the fuck? Sometimes dead is better.
The daughter-in-law briskly repeated, "After you cremated me, the messengers from Yama, the god of death, took me to him. His eyes were shooting flames like the eyes of our Kali, our village goddess. And as soon as he saw me, he said, 'Send this one back. Her mother-in-law is a sinner. Bring her here and put the iron crow to her work. To tear her to pieces with his beak. Dip her in the cauldron of boiling oil.'" He ranted on like this about you for some time, and I fell at his feet, and I begged him. I say, "Don't do this to my mother-in-law.
Don't do this.
She is a very fine woman.
Sacre bleu.
Give me whatever punishment you wish, but please spare my mother-in-law." He was pleased, of course, yes. And he even smiled, and he said, "You can go now. We'll do as you say. But if your mother-in-law ever gives you any trouble, we will drag her here. My messengers will be watching."
It's a voice within a voice.
I tried. And then he gave me all this gold jewelry and money and sent me home. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Adios.
Toodaloo.
People say bad things about the god of death, but he was so good to me.
So good.
The mother-in-law embraced her daughter-in-law and fear and trembling in her heart. With fear and trembling in her heart. She said,
Hey, yo. You really are an angel of this house. You know, you've saved me from the jaws of death's messengers. From now on, I'll do everything you say. Just forgive me everything I've done up until this point. Will you, my darling daughter-in-law? Daughter of mine.
As she touched the young woman's chin tenderly. The daughter-in-law was now the boss of the house, and her mother-in-law and her husband followed her wishes. She was mostly the one that was happy.
Now she beat them.
This is true.
This is true.
All right.
Yeah, I think
we'll come back to some more of
we're
this.
going to come back to some more of this in 2 weeks, because next week is Halloween.
Yeah.
Yeah, Halla-frickin-ween over here. We're going to have a
Just gonna get
special
ready.
episode, a very special episode about werewolves and lycanthropy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Lycanthropy. Yeah, it's going to be fun. I hope you folks enjoyed the episode. Had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I know we did. Sometimes too much fun.
I know. I had so much more planned out, but we didn't make it.
Yeah. We'll have some more in the future.
Very
Let
near
us know
future.
if you
These
like
are
it.
funny as fuck.
Let us know if you like it. Let the world know if you like it. Tell your friends. Tell your mother, your sister, your auntie, your uncle, cousins too.
Shakespeare.
Tell Shakespeare.
I don't know.
Invent a time
Let 'em know.
machine. Go back in time. Punch William Shakespeare in the dick and tell him Howley Boys.
Like, we didn't even get to the part of the laughing fish, man.
We didn't. We never got high enough to laugh with the fish.
It's okay.
Or we got too high to laugh with the
I
fish.
think
But we
can make
will.
it
We
through
will
this
in a
part
week.
next. Yeah.
Yeah, post Halloween.
Yeah.
Yeah, be sure to check out our merch store, teespring.com, teespring.com/high-mythology-merch.
Yeah.
Share this with your friends.
Listen to them everywhere. We're on literally everything.
You know if
Literally
you're listening,
everything.
but if someone's like, hey, I don't have this, we're everywhere.
It's everything.
Yeah, we're everywhere.
That's why I tell everyone too. I'm like, check this shit out.
Yeah. Definitely. I think our next step of distribution is just going to be beaming our podcasts into people's heads while they sleep. So.
I'm going to make a fucking ad. And it's going to be more annoying than fucking Barbara McLaughlin's.
Yeah, political ad season. Yeah.
We'll put our own political ad for fucking podcasting.
Yeah.
Vote us.
Vote Howley Boys. Vote
By
High
just
Mythology.
listening.
Yeah. A vote for Howley Boys is a vote for absolutely nothing. Quality
It means
podcasting.
cleaner water.
It means cleaner butts.
Cleaner static wave.
Cleaner butts. Cleaner underwear.
Oh, that I cannot help. That means you need to fucking get some Chipotle away.
Chipotle. Yeah. Diapers for all the adults.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, yeah. Tune in next week for some Halloween, as I said before. And we love you, folks. Good night.
Love you guys.
Bye.
Bye.